Good afternoon or good morning, according to my time zone. I think it's afternoon in your time
It
zone.
is the afternoon,
Yeah.
but because
So
of the daylight saving time, it feels like night.
so we're both surrounded with night. Here it's 12:35, and we're going to talk about the Mongol invasion of Poland, the first Mongol invasion of Poland from 1240 to 1242. How
Yes.
impactful, yes, impactful was the invasion of Poland?
Well, it was very short. Compared to Hungary, Poland only really got 2 or 3 months of the Mongol onslaught. Nonetheless, it really made an impact on their culture, on how they think. But I think we have to rethink this. It's not those two. It's neighbor, the goal threat that wasn't there before. Um, and the Mongols invaded two more times, at least two more times, very spectacularly, in 1259 and 1288. So
Yeah.
the point is that it was not over. The war was not over in 1241 for the Poles. They now have this new neighbor who wants to conquer them.
Regarding the first campaign, the peak was the Battle of Legnica, and how Poles managed to rebuff the Mongol invasion, the first Mongol invasion of 1240, 1241. It seems that they were more successful than Hungarians.
They actually lost every battle according to their own sources. They lost every battle against the Mongols. However, I feel like they kind of didn't go down easily. Like you've seen Polish bouncers at a bar. You don't want to
Of
mess
course.
with these guys. Well, they got the whole army
Yeah,
assembled
of
out of
course.
these people. And yeah, like Liegnitz, there was a funny trick, according to Jan Długosz, that was employed where the Polish were kind of winning the battle, and then this person came out and he screamed in Polish, "Bigaza" or something like flee, get out of here. And they felt like he was trying to help them, but he wasn't. He was actually on the Mongol payroll, and it seems that like the Poles weren't losing every battle, but they were not fun to fight for the Mongols,
Of
and
course.
I think that's what we're dealing with in this situation.
So you think it was kind of a war of attrition, and on the long run,
Yeah.
Poles won the conflict, or at least they were not subjugated by Mongols like some other parts of the Eastern Europe.
Well, like I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Like the Mongols did not want to stay there. Why?
Yeah.
You're staying everywhere else. Why do you want to stay in Poland? It's because I think they felt that these people were very strong and united, and they had complex fortifications and they had complex armor and weaponry, and they just did not want to fight with them. It was a pain for them to have to struggle with these people. That's my working theory because I mean the Mongols would overrun many countries, right? But
Yeah.
they felt like the Poles had something, and we can't forget that the Poles were in the uh, corner of the Holy Roman Empire.
True.
So you're not fighting them alone. You're now Germany's involved. So
Of course.
there were complexities to
Talk
this.
about the modern borders and modern states. They were part of the whole Roman Empire, or they were allied with them.
Yes, there's something that's kind of ignored in the historiography of the Mongol invasion of Europe, which is that there are many phrases in texts that they were a little bit worried about a counterattack from Germany. But that doesn't come down to us in the secondary literature. But it would have been a very relevant thing.
I mean, we have Annals of Jan Drugus from 15th century. He wrote annals 200-300 years after the actual events. How credible are his annals?
I think they're much more credible than Polish historiography currently is giving him credit for. And here's the giveaway that he might be credible. He quotes a source that we still have. What is it? Uh, Thomas of Spalato. He quotes him, and you can compare the original, and it's very, very close to the original. Like he's literally paraphrasing. But on the Battle of Liegnitz, he talks about these things that we don't have a primary source for. Um, but he names his source. He says it's a Jan Ivanovich.
Mm-hmm. No, you're frozen now.
That he created. Well, I rather think that it's this Jan Ivanovich is his primary source on the Mongol invasion of Poland.
What was behind the Western campaign? We spoke about that many times, and do you think that Genghis Khan and his successors followed a state ideology like every other empire? Every empire in the history has some form of a state ideology, whether rudimentary ideology or ideology in the modern sense of the world. Oh, sorry, modern sense of the word. What do you think about?
I think that
Yeah, please,
yeah,
about the Mongol ideology.
I think that this ideology gave them something in common, right? The Mongols are very pugnacious and they tend to attack each other. And by believing this Chinggis Khan uh, handed down ideology, it, it calms these feelings of tension that like essentially act as like a centrifugal force and just rip apart nomad empires. So a lot of them recognized that this was something that kept them together uh, to keep espousing Chinggis Khan's ideology. But there's a really weird thing happening in historiography in that people don't aren't convinced that Chinggis Khan actually came up with this ideology.
Mhm.
I think maybe it was a later creation, though. And I just think like when? When were they later creating this ideology?
But
But they
we know that Genghis Khan led many campaigns in Asia against the Chinese state, against Persian state, against other Mongol tribes to consolidate his power. We're talking about decades of constant warfare, and it would be very naive to think that he didn't have in mind the idea of conquering maybe not the whole world, but as much as possible.
I think you're right, Saeed. And I've often struggled with this naivety on the part of other historians, where I just think, like, you guys are certainly in the world, but not of it, because
Yeah,
you don't seem to get like what is so obvious. Like, I mean, of course, like if they're trying to conquer the world and they have this reverence for this founding figure, Genghis Khan, he was probably the progenitor of that idea,
of course.
right? Or like, was it his grandson who came up with that? Like, it's sort of, I don't know how to argue with these people. Like,
Who thinks that Mongols didn't have in mind world domination and expansion of their territories? Because we're talking about already a big, huge land territory from Far East to Central Asia.
yeah,
And why such historians are insisting that they didn't plan to conquer the known world if they expanded for the next 50, 60 years or more? They were expanding also to Southeast Asia. They were trying to take over Vietnam and Cambodia.
yeah, invading Java. I
Yeah, they
mean,
were invading
and
Java.
Japan.
Do
Like
you think
that takes
they
effort.
were also planning to militarily occupy these territories? They didn't go there for picnicking. They were planning their campaigns meticulously, and obviously they wanted to take as much as possible. And we're talking about also the Western campaign of his sons and grandsons, which came all the way to Poland, Hungary, Balkans, Middle East. The southern flank ended up almost in Egypt. What was behind the motivation of Mongols to take over the well-known world?
Well, that's the thing. Like, so someone could argue that the Mongols weren't trying to conquer all these places. It's like, well, how did they end up with Indonesia as their neighbor? How did they end up with Lithuania as their
Yeah,
neighbor? It sort of gets to a ridiculous ad absurdum point where we like they just kept stumbling into these campaigns with all these people that they had no problem with. Like,
exactly.
it's a ridiculous idea. And me and Alexander, or Alexander Myrov and I, wrote a an article that tried to sort of recalibrate the because obviously historians are going a little too far to some other direction to argue that the Mongols were just these innocent victims who just kept getting pulled into these battles against their evil neighbors, and pretty soon they'd ended up with the biggest country in the world.
Of course.
But this is not obviously this cannot be what was happening. Like rather it is a deliberate attempt to conquer the world. And I've heard, from historians, I say they were trying to conquer the world, and they say, yeah, but what was the world, the Mongols?
Okay,
As though because
they knew their neighbors very well, and they sent cables and messengers asking for tributes from places like Novgorod or Kiev and Rus before they took over Kiev in in the first campaign. So obviously they were planning the military advancement in all directions.
uh, and they say that in their chronicles, they say literally they plan total conquest in the four directions. So
Yeah,
I really feel like it's quite indefensible to say that they were not trying to conquer the world. This was just a terrible accident
yeah,
that they just
of course, because we know very well that the warfare back then and now it's very expensive, and if military leaders didn't have a prospect of looting and financial gain, they wouldn't go as far as Lithuania or Indonesia. So they were pre-planning the campaign and they calculated expenses and potential gains.
I mean, Chinggis Khan's own son, Bulgan, died outside of Moscow
Yeah.
attacking it. It's just very briefly mentioned in a Mongol translated Persian chronicle, but that is a sign that there are huge risks involved when you can't even protect Chinggis Khan's son.
Of course. Did they feel that there's a divine right for them to take over the territory from Japan to Central Europe? We're talking about ideology. And usually, behind many ideologies, we have also theological interpretation or theological backing of political moves.
Well, that's what I like about this article that Alexander Meyerov was the main author and I was the co-author of. It's going to come out in Studia Slavica. It's a
Very good.
Q2 journal, so it's pretty good.
Hmm.
But what we said was that there was actually this religious back. Often people have portrayed in the last 50 years that, well, the Mongols were kind of more progressive because they
Yeah,
were not religious. They had a freedom of religion,
yeah. We
but
hear this
they
from
had
lots of medieval scholars. They claim that Mongols were almost kind of agnostics, atheists. They didn't practice organized religion, and it doesn't sound very plausible in the medieval times. From similar sources or similar contacts, I've been hearing the notion that the difference between Eastern churches and Roman Catholic Church were not that big at the beginning, etc., etc. But I have a different opinion. I think that these differences were much more highlighted back then than now. We live in a secular society. Okay, I don't live in a secular society, but most of people, especially in the West, they live in secularized societies. So such gaps are,
yeah. The last 4 years should be a reminder that humans are not secular.
yeah, yo, of course.
And so all they get into is really sick religions. In fact, the French Revolution, they tried to get rid of all the names of the months, and
Yeah,
they renamed the months, and they
of course.
were a secular society, and it was just sick, and all they were doing was cutting people's heads off all the time.
True.
This is the problem. As Saint Paul said, humans are a religious animal, or as Plato said, we're a political animal, and you just can't throw that out, and there's no consequences. And the Mongols were fundamentally religious, but it was not a religion that other people were invited to. It was
Yeah.
They are the greatest. They're destined to conquer the world. They're the chosen people.
And they
Don't
have no
stand up against them. Yeah, and what fun is that religion for other people? They said as long as you pay us taxes, you can do your
of course.
side religion. But they were fundamentally religious. They talk about it all the time. Chinggis Khan is chosen by God. You know,
Yeah.
Tangri has chosen Chinggis Khan to be and has chosen the Mongol people that like they are fundamentally very religious, actually.
How much of that ideological concept we can see during a reign of grandsons of Genghis Khan. They were following his footsteps, and they continued his legacy and military conquests. But how loyal they were to the Mongol religion and tradition, because we have a big impact of Chinese customs and Chinese religion on some of them, like Kublai Khan, and how immune they remained from the foreign influence.
There's a very interesting passage from the Franciscan friar uh, William of Rubric, who went to Munka Khan, and he was really trying to convert him to Christianity.
Yeah.
And he seems like a smart guy. You can detect from his book. And he said that he would make Munka Khan so nervous that he would just like constantly drink alcohol around this guy. And eventually he said, like, he didn't want to kill him or anything. He just said, you just go back home and make sure, like, and there was a witch hunt happening. Like they could have killed this guy, but they didn't. But Manku Khan said a very, very deep thing, I think, to William of Rubric before he sent him away. He said, I feel like the paths to God are like the fingers on a hand. And there's these different paths, but they're all going to the same palm. And that, like he said this in his cups. so so he'd been thinking about it. And that was his very Chinggis Khan's grandson ideology. And when he died, the empire actually broke apart in 1259. So he was like the last big great Khan. But he'd heard constantly, my religion's true. This is the truth. You got to believe it. And his I think because I haven't seen it in other, like I don't think he's quoting it. I think this is his own independent thought that he said, you all seem to be going to the same place. Like
Yeah.
so, but you know, at that point there was heavy pressure on these cons. Like everyone saw it as their chance to convert the world to their religion.
What was the turning point for them to accept the notion that they have a heavenly mandate to expand as much as possible and conquer as many nations as possible or many peoples as possible?
Well, it sounds like kind of like a James Bond idea. Like a James Bond villain would say, I'm going to conquer the world. So we have a natural immunity to this idea. But what is illogical about trying to conquer the world? I mean, it's totally logical to try and conquer the world if you're in a good position. And I think uh, it started much earlier than we're giving credit for. I think like Chinggis Khan, I think, was the progenitor of this idea.
Yeah.
He wasn't even the first guy to think it up, but he was just in the early 1200s. He was saying, if nobody can resist us, why shouldn't we just conquer the whole world?
Yeah.
So,
Why they would limit themselves to steps? You know,
I mean, if no one can resist you,
steps.
like, why shouldn't you? And that's what he kind of thought, that nobody can resist them.
What Mongol sources say about the conquest of the world and the heavenly mandate to rule different religions, different races, different ethnic groups?
I like what Simon of Saint Quentin, Simon de Saint Quentin, says about this. He says there. they are uncommunicative with other races, and they want to always best them in sports and every other thing because they literally believe they're kind of like the chosen people. They're superior to other people. And that feeling, you have to enforce that feeling. Like you have to brutalize other people, and so they didn't like when they would lose in sports, and as Simon says, because they would realize, oh, other people are also good at stuff. And so there was a time where some Georgian wrestlers, two of them, beat two Mongol wrestlers just fair and square, just triumphed over them, and the crowd just started rioting, the Mongol crowd, and they rushed in and they broke the arm of, which is pretty lucky in Mongol Empire
Yeah,
standards if you only get your arm broken.
but
But the point was to enforce that the Mongols are the best, they're the greatest, and you don't mess with them. But they were often encountering situations where they were impressed by other nations. There was a moment where Kublai Khan was watching Koreans playing board games, and he said, like, the Koreans are the best at board games. And it's hilarious now because they actually tend to be quite good at like internet, like video games.
of course,
But
one of the hubs.
800 years ago, he said, these are the best. Like that's the best. So they were often encountering a sort of a conflicted feeling that they were told they were the best. Like Kyriakos of Gandak, Armenian, he was taken prisoner in the 1230s by the Mongols. He said, and he learned their language. He goes, I could hear their like generals telling the kids that they're all the chosen ones, that they're the best, and God Tengri has chosen them to be the greatest race, and they're allowed to just beat upon other people. But this is an ancient old tactic, you know. They weren't the first people to think of that, but they had a religious concept of it, and that's what historians are not emphasizing right now, how religious this feeling was, that they're the best, they're the chosen ones. Chinggis Khan is the chosen, but they were actually always talking about this.
What do you think about the Eastern and Western sources regarding Genghis Khan and how he came to the idea that he would represent the mandate of from heaven?
There are two sources totally independent of each other. The Secret History of the Mongols, which is their own Mongolian record, it's an invaluable source of the language as it existed when they conquered the empire. But then you have Juvaini, who is Persian, the governor of Baghdad, and he independently confirms this story that there was a shaman, there was a medicine man, no less, Teb Tengri, who was always telling Genghis Khan, like, you're the greatest, you're going to conquer the world. So yeah, Mike Tyson had a Don King telling him this stuff.
Of course. Or before him, he had this Italian coach who was his adopted father,
Yeah,
Cus D'Amato.
Muscamato or something?
No, Cus D'Amato was a well-known boxer.
Custamato.
Yeah, Cus D'Amato was a well-known boxer, and later on he became an excellent coach. And he took Mike Tyson under his wings and turned him into a very good heavyweight champion, the youngest heavyweight champion. Unfortunately, he had to fight this scripted bout with
It felt very scripted.
Paul. I don't know whether you watched that or not.
I did, like, I coined a term actually. I was like, this is boxing wood. This isn't Hollywood.
Okay,
No, I
they
didn't.
needed only Vince McMahon from WWE. But I think Vince McMahon is busy now with Trump's administration, and maybe Trump is going to appoint him to one of his posts.
Well, the Trump thing is sort of relevant to Genghis Khan in a way because
Okay.
when Genghis Khan took over, there wasn't much opposition. You would have expected, there'd be this great opposition to him, but the whole country of Mongolia was kind of ready for, a dictator.
Or coup
And
d'etat, and maybe, yeah, a unifier in the form of
yeah,
supreme dictator. True.
and how they frame it in their histories is that the country was so lawless and pathological that they were just so hoping that there would be someone who would impose the law.
Of
And
course.
that comes through in European, Persian, Arabic,
Of course.
Chinese, Mongolian sources. They all say the same thing, that someone who could come along and strongman the law back into
Yeah.
existence was a
To rule
great
with the
person.
iron fist. This is what happens from time to time. When country needs a dictator or group of dictators to take over and abolish all kinds of freedoms in name of the common good or mandate from heaven in their case. What we know about what Arabic sources say about Genghis Khan and his successors, because they directly dealt with some of them few decades
Yes.
ago.
Well, there's obviously going to be a conflict right from the start, right? Because
Of course.
Chinggis Khan is a pagan,
Yeah,
and these people in the Arab world have understood that their religion is going to conquer the world, and this came a very hilarious result where the Chinese were trying to undermine all the powerful Arabs in the Mongol Empire. So they told Chinggis Khan, no, Kublai Khan, they told him, their holy book says that they're going to just kill everyone who doesn't convert to Islam. So Kublai Khan summoned these cadis and
yeah.
experts of Islamic law. And he said, "Is this true that the Quran says you're gonna kill everyone who's not Muslim or something?" And one of the braver older guys said, "Yes, that is true." And it did not go well for them.
Of course,
He banned their halal
of
killing
course,
of animals. Like he just wanted to kind of mess with them,
of course.
uh, just test them. Like he didn't want to actually destroy them, but he just wanted to make their life difficult because they admitted that their holy book said that they're going to conquer the world, and that's his religion.
Of course,
Now you see Kublai's religion. His religion is the Mongols are going to
of course.
conquer the world. So
So I'm going to send you the link in a few minutes because now we're running out of time and we still have another session.
see you soon.
See you soon. We we didn't talk about the Mongol slave trade on the Black Sea during our sessions. We've been talking about Mongols for maybe 2 years. I have to check my records, but we spoke with each other probably more than 10 times, and we didn't mention the Mongol involvements with the slave trade.
Yes, in fact, the Mongol slave trade was probably there too for a long time, but these Italian, Genoese, and Venetian people who had gone up into the Black Sea found that they could exercise this brutal uh, regime without any kind of supervision from the church, and it was
Okay,
very good money. for
Of
them.
course.
So they would go up to the Black Sea. Uh, so the Genoese eventually drove the Venetians out of the Crimea, but that's
Yeah,
where this was happening. So the Venetians moved to the Don River base, the where the Don River opens into the Black Sea, and at Tana they had started a very lucrative slave trade. And in fact, Marco Polo, no less, very famous guy, returned to Europe with a quote Tatar slave because that's what they
yeah,
called just anyone from and that kind of like relates to like the the mystery of Tataria,
yeah,
like this sort of conspiracy theory emerging that oh they call all of that Tataria, so that must be like some great ancient kingdom, but they just called anyone any any Asian from that region they call them Tatars.
of course. I mean, if I take a photo with a Malaysian ambassador in Amman because of my work, another guy in Belgrade, and unfortunately he works in the Serbian parliament, is asking me who's this Chinese in. He, for him, all Asian people are Chinese, and that idiot works for the government. So I don't blame people in 12th or 13th century for being uneducated or misinformed or operating with less information than we have, because even in modern time we have all kinds of people who think in that term from maybe 1835 or 1845. If you remember these European cartoons about transatlantic slave trade or all kinds of European imperialism, and these cartoons are very very racist.
Well, in a way, they're they're not wrong because the Chinese had their word for civilization is wenhua,
Yeah,
like how reading changes you. And what I've discovered is that the Chinese influenced the Japanese, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, and they adopt to become literate meant to learn Chinese.
yeah. Back in the days, of course, they dominated.
Yeah, they were the only literate people.
True,
So there is an element of that that's correct that they really have affected. But the nomads, to their credit, just developed an alphabet on their own. The runic script,
of course,
and that was in a way more advanced than Chinese because you could learn it in a day. You could learn,
of course,
and it's much like our Greek alphabet
of course.
that's come to us via Latin.
You don't have to spend the whole life learning the alphabet. uh, we mentioned that we'll talk about the battle at Ain Jalut, which happened in Galilee. It's approximately from the opposite side of Ajun in northwestern Jordan, where Mamluks, Ayyubid dynasty built a well-known castle to counter Crusaders. And how it happened that Mamluks finally beat Mongols in 1260.
Well, it's an amazing battle because it was uh, nobody had really kind of decisively defeated the Mongols. And there was a feeling that you can't defeat them.
Yeah, they're invincible.
The Mam, sorry?
Yeah, they looked invincible at that time.
Yeah. And there was a feeling that they were the end of the world. It's all water on the bridge now, and we all laugh about it. But it was there was a feeling that you cannot defeat these people. And when they were defeated, an Arabic chronicler wrote a very, I think, very moving line. He said, "Every evil can be defeated by an evil of its own kind."
Well,
And what he
it's a
meant
very,
was that the Mamluks had been slaves,
of course.
you know, this huge slave trade coming out of the Crimea. They had been brought to Egypt, speaking Turkic, all kinds of phenotypical expressions of these people. They were not one race or the other,
No,
but they had taken over the government
of
in
course.
1260, and they immediately defeated the Mongols. And it was thought by Arabs who'd watched this total destruction of Islamic civilization going on for decades that the guys who finally beat them were slaves from the slave trade, the Mongol slave trade.
Of course, or many of them came from Central Asia. If you're
Yeah,
talking,
they were just
oh,
brought to
yes,
Crimea and sold. It didn't matter who they were. But they Mamluk means slave, of course, and they took over the government in 1260. The leader of them was Baibars, means the prince of tigers, the prince of leopards,
yeah,
and he had blue eyes. He seems to have been Asian, actually, like he looked Asian, but he had blue eyes, and he finally crushes them. And it was in a way a kind of a like it's a moving story to me because they defeated them at the Spring of Goliath.
yeah,
That's what Ain Jalut means. It means the
yeah.
Spring of Goliath. This little but it was where they rumored that David had defeated Goliath.
True,
So
true.
I'm
There's
surprised people
symbolism
don't.
in that at that site, but I don't think that only the reference to Goliath and David took place. Mongols were busy with the civil war. The civil war between different factions started, and they withdrew the majority of their troops back to Central Asia.
Yes, this is true. Munka Khan had been leading this brutal war of destruction. He took Baghdad in 1258, which was shocking. He killed the caliph, something that had never happened. And he continued to advance, and he probably was going for Egypt. You know, if we're being strategic about it, like I mean, everyone who gets that close to Egypt is going for Egypt, and they were defeated though at this Ain Jalut, and the commander of the Mongols was Ket Buka, which means something like tough bull. Like he was a real gangster, but he was captured on the battlefield, and he said some kind of insulting words to Baibars, like last insult, and he was killed. And it was this moment where they realized like there are solutions to the Mongol problem. But you're right that it was they were going through their own crisis in that year. The Mongol Empire had effectively broken apart in 1260. So it's no accident that this Ain Jalut battle happened at that moment.
But we know
But
that
they often say,
Mongol Empire continued to exist for another 200-300 years. They didn't disappear overnight. Unlike the state of Attila the Hun, they were much better statesmen, and they managed to rule big swaths of Eurasian territory. Only maybe in 16th century, Ivan the Terrible managed to crush them. And still there were pockets of Mongols in European parts of Russian Empire, and of course in Central Asia and on the Far East.
Part of their charm, you could say, part of their strength was that they uh, people continued to get legitimacy from being a descendant of Genghis Khan. So even though it was totally contradictory to Islamic thought, you could still achieve a sort of why I deserve to be the king. You could get that from being a descendant of Genghis Khan. Just to tell you of a handful of people who did it, Timur, Timurid dynasty
Yeah.
derived its right to rule from Genghis Khan, but also the Mughal dynasty in Egypt. Mughal means Mongol, and Babar claimed that he was a descendant of Genghis Khan. So that was part of it, why it was so long lasting. And the irony of this all is I think Genghis Khan was not a nobleman. I think he was just an upstart.
Okay, yeah,
But people who were looking to legitimize their rule, like why I deserve to be the king, is because I descend from Genghis Khan. And this continued through the whole of Asia, whether it's the Uzbek dynasty or the Mughal dynasty or the Timurids. And all those guys who Ivan the Terrible fought, they all said they were descendants of Genghis Khan. And it's very funny now with genetics. They've realized that maybe like 1 out of 10 people in the heart of Asia descend from some common ancestor around the year 1200. That's probably Genghis Khan.
Yeah, so we can talk about a bigger number of Mongols than the official number or the official figure. What do you think about that idea that many of modern people who live in Central Asia and in the Far East are descendants of Mongols?
I think it's true. For instance, the Hazara people, they make up maybe 10% of Afghanistan's population. The Hazara means literally the camp of the Mongols. And these people look still Asian. Like they don't look, they look East Asian.
Not
So I
like
think
not like Khazars who were mentioned in medieval chronicles, and some people think that they are progenitors of Ashkenaz people. You have that theory. It's a strong theory, and lots of historians wrote about that. Lots of people wrote about so-called European Jews as descendants of Hazars, and we have primary sources from early medieval period when they maintained the correspondence with Jews in Andalusian Caliphate, and they tried to convert them to Judaism, which eventually happened. And
I think it's like the only officially Jewish state that existed
before Israel,
until
yes.
19.
I mean, if we can call them Jews, this is also the problem, because I don't think that it's an ethnic term. It's maybe cultural, religious term. And also that is questionable because religiously they differ from each other. Each of these group has a different customs, different tenet, and it's wrong to think that they are from the same branch, but it's another topic. What do you think about grandsons of Genghis Khan? Were they up to
Well,
the challenge, or they
well,
failed?
this is the
Yeah,
most deep question because there's a Chinese saying that wealth does not last more than three generations in a family.
yeah,
And when we look at Genghis Khan's grandsons, we can see that there's a reason for that saying
of
because
course,
they were so. And I mean, before he died, he literally said, I wish I could stay alive forever because I could run this empire.
of
But I
course,
know my grandsons are gonna
of course.
F it all up. And they did. You know. So like Chinggis Khan grew up in poverty, it seems like. So he knew about things in the world that his grandsons would not have known about.
Of course,
Like he knew what it was like to be hungry, stuff like this. And
of course,
his grandsons did not know about that. They knew about you can have anything you want anytime. And so that really undermined uh, the eternal empire he was going for. They start to see each other as rivals and threats. They start to assassinate each other, and that was exactly what he was worried about.
yeah,
Mind you, he may have killed his own firstborn son, Chachi. Like I don't dismiss this claim that he poisoned Chachi because it's just the timing so convenient right before he died. But he was kind of thinking about like how do you make a world empire last forever? And he knew that the grandsons were going to be a problem.
of course, because they will be the first or second generation born in luxury, and maybe they will be spoiled, unable to exercise toughness that he exercised. And Ibn Khaldun had similar theories in his books about first, second, third generation of Bedouins who lived in urban centers and become spoiled. He built
Yes, and
the
it's
whole concept around that.
yeah, like it does happen. It's sort of inevitable. It's a sort of natural thing. Like if we were naturalists, like Richard Attenborough, just watching humans, we'd go, well, his grandsons are going to move into the city. They're going to, but the Turkish ruler, something Kultekin or something, he wrote a inscription in Chinese and Turkic runes in the 700s, and he said, if you go to China, if you get drawn in by the comforts of life there,
Of
the Turkic spirit, that our power will lose all meaning and will just be destroyed by them.
course.
That was 500 years before Genghis Khan. So they always knew that this was a problem.
Trap, probably trap for such people who came from the steppe. But of course, times changes, people change, habits change, and I don't think that one has to be from the Hikand in order to be functional or capable of conquering and maintaining the dominance. We know that opposite examples are uh, char- opposite examples characterize our era, and in our times, warfare and domination is not expressed in a way of Turkic nomads or Mongol nomads. What do you want to say for the end of this conversation? Because you wrote this scholarly paper with your colleague Alexander Myrov, and both of you were debated about the official ideology of the Mongol Empire, what was behind the urge to conquer the known world, and how they gave themselves the mandate from heaven.
Well, I think that we're just getting back to common sense in a way, which is such an easy job to just go back to common sense. All we're saying is it's undeniable that the Mongols had a uh, urge expressed to conquer the world, and as quaint as it sounds, that's really what they were about. They were doing that, and it seems like historians have done a sort of mental gymnastics to explain away all the evidence that was the case. But in fact, it was the case. So all we're saying is like, so who do you think this ideology probably started with? Well, it probably started with the guy that everyone said it started with, Chinggis Khan.
Yeah.
And so it's not that hard to argue the obvious, you know. So, but history needs to be redressed a little bit because we tend to go in weird directions. We tend to deviate from the obvious. And so we're just kind of going back to the obvious. And we're just saying it sounds like Chinggis Khan may have been the progenitor of this ideology in action.
Founder of the ideology, the founder, because he was the founding father of the dynasty that continued to
Yeah.
rule for.
Wouldn't that be weird if it was someone later than him who came up with it? Like it's just so.
Of course, they need the legitimacy for military conquests.
Yeah. So it was not a hard paper to argue, but you always realize with historians they're kind of lawyers. They haven't become lawyers yet, but they, they often complicate things and they see things that aren't there and convince you that they're there. So we're just saying no. Like the Mongol Empire started with a world conquest ideology. Who do you think came up with that?
Of course.
It's probably the guy they all see.
Of course.
Of
course. He was fighting all his life. Actually, he died on one of the campaigns.
Yeah, and his last words, according to Rashid ad-Din, was like, "Don't attack the Jin dynasty through this pass. You got to go around this other." Like,
of course, he was obsessed with the warfare.
Yeah,
and also his successors continued the same mentality and the same political ideology of that time. When I say ideology, I don't want people to get confused and think that medieval rulers and ancient rulers followed similar set of ideas and political concepts like modern day ideologues, but also they were not completely unaware of that. They were not ignorant people, so to say. They were more advanced than what some of modern historians are perceiving them to be.
I think that's a major problem. Our tendency to reduce these people to a sort of troglodyte mentality, and then try and make sense of their history. Like, but I think they were just like us, as the great Chinese historian Ouyang Xiu said. When I compare myself to the ancients, it's like two hands, and we just match. Yeah, and there's a lot of historians who say, "Oh, that they had lead poisoning. They're crazy. Don't listen to them." But no, I think, they are like this. So
no, we tend some people in our epoch at academia tend to underestimate previous civilizations and previous rulers. They think that what we have now is the best of the best, and I disagree with that. And we see very obvious examples of modern day leaders who are not up to the task, and there may be better material for WWE than to run the country. But on the other side, you also have opposing camp, which is not much better in intellectual sense. So it's not a win-win situation; it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, we have two camps that are both repulsive to
Yeah,
us.
they're very repulsive.
But
I mean, if I'm
but
eligible to vote, I would never vote for any of them. I would maybe vote for a third candidate or fourth candidate, or I would abstain.
I shouldn't say it, but I still think I'm glad whoever won the U.S. election actually won it this time.
I mean, it's easier for you because you're Canadian, so you're not directly affected. We may get more affected in this region, but as I said, it's very.
Oh, I just about that. Like, guys, if you like history, you got to know Iran is not trying to kill Trump. They would
Yeah,
never do it. So I'm just calling that out as a historian.
of
This
course.
is crap. This is the
It is a
dumbest
bullcrap, of
plot
course,
they ever ran with. So
of course.
yeah.
You have also the Democratic camp, which claims that Trump is a Russian spy, which is equally retarded. The guy, the guy belongs to the caste of business people, tycoons for the past, I don't know, 3, 4 generations. He appeals to rednecks and people from the countryside, but he himself is a guy from New York, and he acts like a gangster.
He's the guy that if those rednecks saw a movie, he would
Yeah,
be the
yeah, yeah.
bad
They
guy.
like the gangster from the movie. The guy who's beating up the chairman of WWE, Vince McMahon, and then he shaves his head. All these things they have a positive impact on people who follow that type of culture. And I don't think
Uh,
that Genghis Khan or Kublai Khan were less intellectual or less advanced than Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or, God forbid, Hillary Clinton.
they had the same ultimate worries that we have today, and they were from the same genetic
Yeah,
like the material that we come from. So
of
I
course.
really dislike this idea when people say, don't talk to those people. No, ancient people, they're crazy. They have lead poisoning.
No, they were not.
No,
They
they
were
were
not.
just like us.
You can track people can track art from that time, architecture from that time, and many pieces of art are more advanced than what we have these days. They were more advanced artists than us, with
In the
less
Louvre,
sources.
I saw maybe 1,500 BC Egyptian portrait of a guy, and it
Yeah,
was perfectly three-dimensionally
of
his
course,
face.
of course.
So,
Some people these days will say that aliens did that, not humans, aliens. I had the
and what are
fight.
they actually
I
saying?
had the fight with a friend. I mean, former friend, because we don't communicate anymore. But he's a programmer. He's an IT guy, successful. He makes good money from Oracle, and for some weird reason, he decided to act as a historian and archaeologist at the age of 40. And I told him, you have lots of time on your hands. Apply at the university faculty of philosophy and apply for historiography and study 4 5 years, 10 years, and try to prove your ideas that Bosnian pyramids are older than pyramids in Egypt. Because he came to me with these stupid ideas that pyramids in Bosnia, which are only hills. If you maybe you watch these hills in central Bosnia, and he claims no, it was the center of the ancient civilization that existed 35,000 years ago. And they ask him, where's the primary sources, written sources? If civilization was very advanced, they must have some records. But he was ready. He said, no, the nuclear apocalypse destroyed everything. And we don't have.
It's scary when like everyone thinks they're a freaking expert
Yeah,
historian,
yeah.
right?
No, the
Like
guy
you don't have to actually
looked
train.
perfectly normal. He looked perfectly normal for 10, 15 years, and suddenly he flipped. I don't know what happened to him.
It's crazy. I mean, like everything in life, if you're good at it, you should practice then. You should
True.
train. But they all think they're expert historians and they just get it and they just know it.
For some
Well,
reason, history
put
is appealing to them. It's more appealing than, let's say, for us to become surgeons and open heads of people and perform all kinds of surgeries and medical experiments. Anyway, I'm very happy that you found time, and we're going to talk more. We didn't
yes,
finish. Thank you
it
so
was a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you for the paper. It's very interesting scholarly paper that you produced with Alexander. I'm happy that collaboration continues regardless of all kinds of political obstacles.
Yeah. And when it's all over, it's
Yeah,
going to be
exactly.
over.
Yeah. Yeah, they should get
And
over it.
I'm going to be proud that I was friends with those people. So I
Yeah.
don't,
No, no, you're a good example.
yeah. So I don't regret anything
Of course.
about how I've conducted myself towards the
You
Russians. And
conducted
I,
yourself very well.
Slava Rusi.
Yeah. All the best.
Maybe edit that.
Yeah, we'll see. Cheers, man.
Okay.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye bye.